Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, please be seated. First item on the agenda is accounting specialist for the Treasurer's Office, Mr. Giannino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening, I have the pleasure of introducing Darshna Rana, who has accepted the position of accounting specialist. A few things have happened in the office in the past year. As we've had some changes, we're making a different change from an administrative assistant position to an accounting specialist. Our positions in the office are more financially driven, especially in the treasury side, where Darshna will be going over and working with Andrea O'Shea, the assistant treasurer, a lot of bank reconciliations, some analysis, those sort of things. We also have, through this process, over the last 9-10 months, we've reorganized the department a bit. We now have our treasury group, which would be Andrea and Darshna, if she's accepted this evening. We have our collection group, which is Terry Clement, Paula McMahon, and Jane Etheridge. And now we have a payroll benefits group. In the past, we had a payroll administrator, then we had a benefits administrator and benefits specialist, and they worked independently. Now we're bringing the three of them together, we replaced the benefit specialist with a treasury accountant, treasury collector, accounting assistant, so a little higher grade. But now we have those three distinct groups. In the treasury group, they are cross-trained both in the collection and the payroll group is cross-trained with the treasury and the collector side, because payroll administrator has done that, worked in those different groups. But I'm happy with the addition of Darshna. We'll have those specific teams together. And in the last couple of months, in November, we changed our banking to a different bank, and the team did a great job. From every single part of my team did a very good job and got us going in probably about 20 days, about a month and a half quicker than we were thinking we were going to do it. But with the change in Century Bank going over to Eastern, it was a time to, I didn't want to have to go from Century to Eastern, then moving into a different bank. So we rushed that too. So that's really what's been happening right now. We're getting ready in the budget season. So having Darshna join us on the 24th of January will be a very good addition.
Thank you.
Mr. Giannino. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with Gary's recommendation, I appoint Darshna Rana to the position of accounting specialist in the Burlington Collector Treasurer's Office, and ask the board waive its 15-day waiting period.
So moved. Second. Moved and second. All those in favor of waiving the 15-day waiting period? Aye. Opposed, abstained? 5-0-0. Welcome aboard, Darshna.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Much.
Thank you. Good luck. Congratulations. Okay.
We all have to, the next person, we're gonna keep going.
All right, next item on the agenda, number 358, appointment of 2 police officers. Deputy Chief Kirshner, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Chief Brown would have liked to have been here tonight, but another work commitment has had him tied up where he couldn't be here tonight. But he does normally attend these appointments. Tonight I'm coming to you requesting the appointment of 2 new officers. The first one is Devin Neal, who's originally from Castleton, New York. Officer Neal is a 2021 graduate of Merrimack College in North Andover, majoring in criminology and criminal justice. He's currently seeking his master's degree from Merrimack College, also in criminology and criminal justice, while attending the police academy at Merrimack, which you were aware of, being a teacher there yourself. Officer Neal also maintains an interest in fire services. He has completed several fire service training programs and interned with the Fire and Explosion Investigation Section of the Massachusetts State Police in Stowe. He's also assisted the Mass State Police and the National Transportation Safety Board in the aftermath of the Columbia gas explosion in 2018. Mr. Neal has volunteered with several charitable groups in Merrimack Valley while attending Merrimack College. Some of the groups are the Andover Village Improvement Society, the Habitat for Humanity in Lawrence, New Day Syria, which is, they raise funds for the women and children in Syria. And also he's part of MAC Gives Back, which is where Merrimack students, faculty, and staff packed more than 180,000 meals during 6 separate events this year. And the meals are given to nearby food pantries and soup kitchens. So he's currently in the academy at Merrimack. He is thought of very highly. We put them through not only the interview process with us, they went through, a physical fitness test. They went through a scenario-based test with us at the station, and then interviews with the town administrator and the assistant town administrator and the chief and I. So at this time, I'm requesting that Devin Neal be appointed to the police department.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Sagarino. Thank you, Chief. And with the Deputy Chief's recommendation, I appoint Devin Neal to the position of patrolman in the Burlington Police Department and ask that the board waive its 15-day waiting period.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Okay. Just one quick note on Mr. Neal. I believe he's also the top academic and top
Physical fitness.
physical fitness in the academy as well.
Yes, he is. And he comes, I've spoken to a couple of his professors at Merrimack where he's tops in his classes there. He's a very good candidate.
Very lucky to have him.
Yes, we are.
Okay, next one, Chief.
All right, the second one is Brendan Hofferty. Brendan grew up in Franklin, Mass., but he does have roots here. His father grew up here in Burlington, former Burlington resident. And his grandfather at one time was a special with us at the Burlington Police Department. Mr. Hofferty has worked as a civilian dispatcher with the Mills Police Department this past year. He is also a graduate of Merrimack College in 2020, majoring in criminal justice. While attending a Washington semester program at the American University in Washington, D.C., Mr. Hofferty interned with the Metropolitan Police Department, Office of the General Counsel. There he worked alongside department staff and assisted in civil and criminal cases. He is an active volunteer. He was a camp counselor at the Adirondack Club, working with kids ages 16 to 13. And he currently serves as a tutor at the Boys and Girls Club in Lawrence, working with kids aged 6 to 16. His responsibilities were to teach both educational and life skills. Brendan has also been involved in raising money for causes including assisting disabled veterans, refugees, and those affected by COVID-19. Again, he also went through the process with Mr. Neal and did very well throughout the process. And I come to you tonight requesting that he be appointed to the police department.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Sagarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the Deputy Chief's recommendation, I appoint Brendan Hofferty to the position of patrolman in the Burlington Police Department and ask that the board waive its 15-day waiting period.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? 500. We're all set.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll have them here at some point to introduce them to both in the academy right now. So at some point, we'll have them at one of the meetings so you can all meet them. So, thank you very much.
I was just going to say,
Thank you, Chief.
both candidates seem to have a pretty impressive background in volunteer work in their young careers here.
They're very well-rounded. I think we're getting some very good officers.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay, next item, 359. Town Administrator, Administrative Assistant, Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have had a lot of interest in this position in our office, and we conducted several rounds of interviews, and we came through with some excellent candidates. I'd like to thank the interview team, which consisted of Joanne Faust, our HR Director, Melissa Tentakoulis, our Economic Development Director, as well as Lynn Mills and Betty McDonough prior to her retirement in our office. The candidate that stood out the most to the interview team was Ellen Murphy. Ellen is a Burlington resident and holds a bachelor's degree in communications and public relations from Massachusetts College, which we talked about, that we all may be more familiar with that as North Adams State, as well as a master's degree in marketing and advertising from Emerson College. She has a significant amount of marketing and communications experience on her resume at the corporate level, as well as on her own as an independent marketing services provider. And with that introduction, I wish to appoint Ellen M. Murphy to the position of Administrative Assistant 1 in the Burlington Select Board TA office, and ask that the board waive its 15-day waiting period.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 5-0-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Ellen is here. Congratulations.
Welcome aboard.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Welcome. Excited to have you.
All right, send it back this way.
Should have brought our own for crying out loud.
Okay, next item in the agenda is 360, it's approval for holding both live and virtual town meetings. Myrna, I know you want to speak on this, I'm gonna have, Amy and Bill discuss it, and then we'll get your point of view. Amy, Ms. Warfield. Mr. Byer.
Why don't you start with Bill?
Okay. Bill, why don't you start? You're muted, I believe.
No, I think you're on mute.
I make more sense when I'm muted. Well, obviously we have a town meeting coming up, and we need to make a decision on how we wish to hold it. In September, I would have laid easy money that we'd be meeting in person, but seems to me this latest batch of COVID excuse me, data suggests that maybe that's not the advisable thing to do. So that instead of meeting all in person in the auditorium, that we ought to try to have the meeting in the same manner that we've been doing for the last year, which includes a few people being able to meet at the high school in breakout rooms, and everybody else checking in virtually. There is an issue with that, in that the legislation that allows us to do that has expired. Where the ability to hold virtual open meetings has been continued, that does not apply to town meetings, I'm afraid. So we've been in conversations with Ken Gordon to see if we can get something passed through the legislature that would enable us to do that.
Okay, thank you, Bill. Ms. Warfield.
I don't really have much more to add, except for we did, you should have received from, we just received it from Lisa Mead, the wording for the special act that Mr. Gordon will present after you vote on it to the governor's office, so that they can present and get the a special act put in place for us to be able to run a remote representative town meeting again.
Okay,
We are extending it, the date on the special act will extend through December of this year, just to make sure we're covered, that we don't have to go back and do this again if the situation warrants.
okay. Myrna, I'll get you in a second. Amy, I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
Are we gonna need two votes? One to hold the live and virtual town meeting? And
Yeah.
then another one for the special act?
Correct. So the first one would be your normal vote that you've done, like Bill said, for previously this, or in 2021, that allowed for a remote or hybrid town meeting. And then the second one would be for requesting to Ken Gordon to submit for, on our behalf, the special act to the governor's office and the legislature.
Okay, thank you. Myrna, did you want to come up and say something? Make sure, just identify yourself, record.
Oh, thank you so much. Hi, I'm Myrna Saltman, town meeting member from Precinct 2 and Rules Chairman, or Chairman of the Rules Committee. And this is Jeff DeBona, who's also a member of the Rules Committee. At our meeting last night, we discussed about the time the town meeting starts and the time the town meeting ends. And currently, it's been 7:30 start time and then end by 11. But our committee, with a lengthy discussion, felt that the town meeting could begin at 7 o'clock with the last article possibly ending by 10:30, or if that were to end that night's meeting, that would be the end of the meeting that night. And it was a unanimous decision. So I had spoken to Bill about it today. He asked that I come before you gentlemen and so state. And so that is why I'm here, and Jeff can certainly add his own. If you have any questions, please do so.
Hey, so with regards to changing the start time, I'm gonna go to ask Amy Warfield. Amy, is that our vote, or how do we even approach that subject?
Yes, the selectmen are responsible for setting the time and the location, basically. That's one reason why we have to get this vote from you for going to a remote meeting. So yes, that would be a vote that you all could take.
And that could be incorporated into tonight's first motion, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. And it would be just for net right now, it would be just for the one meeting, which would make sense to vote for it in the remote, the vote for the remote meeting. And then going forward, we could make a decision about changing that permanently.
Okay.
And that would just be every time the warrant is made up. And then when you guys vote for the warrant, that you're setting it to 7 p.m.
Thank you. Mr. Sagarino, did you have anything to add?
I would just ask Amy and Bill, is there any issue where the warrant's already been posted for a particular time with changing that at this point? Should we mess around with that right now, or should we try to change the time for future town meetings and going forward? I don't think many people would argue against the 7 o'clock start time. I would be in favor of that as well. I'm just wondering, given all the complexities around this current town meeting, if we should make it potentially even more difficult by messing around with the time. I just want to get your opinion on that.
Well, as the warrant's already gone out with the time set on the cover sheet, I guess I'd be hesitant on changing it at this point, and that we'd look at doing it for the future.
I kind of agree with that, just because again, we've got lots of confusion going, or lots of variables going with this particular town meeting.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to start with the board. Nick, any questions or comments on this?
No, everything seems to be pretty straightforward. I like changing it to 7 o'clock. I think that's no one wants to be there at night. None of us. I don't care who you are. So I mean, I think that if we want to do that for May, that makes sense. Given the complexities around bringing virtual back, but fully on board.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, I'm in support of all of this, and I think, Brendan, we're probably going to have to wait till the next town meeting, but it's a great idea.
Thank you.
Mr. Randy.
No, I have no issue with it whatsoever. There's a lot of town meeting members on that board right there. So I don't know if you're gonna let the public speak on this or you're gonna just go with just.
I think we're just gonna go with this for now. Mr. Runyon,
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. 6 o'clock would be okay with me. But I would concur with the town administrator. I think maybe we're just a little bit too close to January to do this without getting feedback from the entire body, perhaps, but I would think it would probably pass rather relatively easy. But I think we should stick with the what's printed in the warrant for January and pick it up again get closer to May.
the only reason I say let's not go to the town meeting members on it, because we're not talking about the time change at this meeting. That's down the road. So, tonight's, we'd be voting for the January meeting still at 7:30, so that we don't mess up the posting. And then down the road, we could, ask for input from other town meeting members who may be against that. Don't think you can get too many of them. Anyway, that being said, I'll be looking for a motion to vote in and to approve a live and virtual town meeting for January 24th,
So moved.
7:30 PM at the Burlington High School. So moved.
Second.
And second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500. Now, town council has drafted a motion. I've asked Selectman Priest if he could read that motion as drafted.
Absolutely. So making a motion to request Representative Gordon submit the special act allowing room for participation for town meeting to the governor to file directly with the legislature.
That's a motion. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 500 for that motion. Myrna, just let us, are you gonna spearhead the charge on changing that with Amy, or?
You tell me. I mean, I'm learning the ropes here, as we go through this. So.
Yeah, we can handle it between Myrna and myself and Lynn when we get when we look to build the May town meeting warrant. We'll make that change and then you guys will vote on it when the warrant comes to your attention in a meeting.
Okay, just for, make sure, is there any town meeting member out there who's opposed to going earlier? I don't see anybody. There's no hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
Hands up.
There'll be plenty of time for them to talk.
Yeah, I know. I didn't think there'd be anybody, that's why I did it. All right, so that's all set. You guys are all set. We're done with that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, next item 361 has been postponed. 362. The Board of Health has asked us to support, this ever-changing pandemic we're in. I don't know if anybody from the Board of Health is here online. If not, I'll continue to work with Dr. Weiner on their meeting tomorrow night. I'll continue to work with Dr. Weiner on it. They did request signage on town buildings. I believe that's already been done. There is no mask mandate at this time. So I will continue to work with him and see what happens with their meeting tomorrow night. Any members of the board wanted to talk on that at all? No? Okay. All set on that one, Mr. Sagarino?
Yep.
Okay. Item 363 is a continued public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, can I just say that I don't think we're at 6:30 yet?
Okay.
So, would the
I'm
board
sorry.
be willing to consider taking something out of order?
Absolutely.
Maybe the 250th celebration. I know that we have
Okay,
some folks in the virtual meeting that want to speak on that.
okay. So we're gonna take item 367 out of order because the other items we have are public hearings that start on or after 6:30, and we're not there yet. So I'm gonna ask, Mr. Coppola, are you talking on this?
I will.
Sorry.
I can give you an update on what's occurred since the last meeting when we met.
Okay. Why don't you do that, Mr. Peter?
Okay, we did not meet face to face, but Mike and Nick and I traded some information. And we came up with just a draft list of organizations and departments that we thought should be on the committee. Then, following, member, Hogan's suggestion, we try to reach Phil Gallagher, who I think contacted Wayne, who's now on board, and, Maureen Schuler, who were the chairs of the town's 200th anniversary committee. And, with that, I'll let Wayne speak if he wants. He can tell you, what they did 24 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Capola. Mr. Higdon,
Unmute, I think he's on mute.
I think you're on mute, Wayne.
All right, yeah, that makes things better. I'm of the idea of letting the board ask questions of what they expect for celebrations for all three different events, meaning the town and the national level, rather than give you an overview and not feed information you may not even be interested in.
I'll ask the members if they have anything to say or ask. But I don't think it's, this board is the one coming up with the ideas of this stuff. But Mr. Hogan, you have your hand raised.
Having participated in the bicentennial with Wayne and a lot of other very dedicated people, I suppose, in addition to wanting to know, what people are looking for as far as celebrations, I'm interested in who's going to volunteer and what the structure of the committee and subcommittees are going to look like. And I think I'd like to have some of that information before we talk about parades and whatever else. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Wayne, did you get that?
Yes, I did.
Mr. Priest, anything? Oh, sorry. Wayne?
No, go ahead.
All right. Wayne, Mr. Priest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so after, trading some info with Peter and Mike, I think that my concern, and it's not just my concern, I know I've talked to folks about this, is that we're not going to have the same type of volunteer pool that we've had in the past. It's just, people are being pulled in 9 million different directions. I would like us to maybe take a step back as a board and look at what we think we would like this committee to be and what we think is realistic, given the lack of volunteers that we typically have been experiencing. Don't get me wrong, I think, the 250th, country's birthday, I think people will care and you'll get some volunteers, but nothing like we have in the past. And so I think that if we maybe took a step back and with Peter and Wayne and whoever else could be a part of that conversation, just developed a very clear, concise, here's what we're looking for, then we can, hand that to that committee and say, okay, because the committee's probably gonna be small, and despite the fact that we want to be larger, and we're not gonna have the right amount of volunteers. So I'm thinking that if we can help out and say, here's the area of attack that we'd like you to focus on, I think it'll make the committee's job a lot easier, and we wouldn't wind up with a lot of subcommittees of that committee and a lot of people running in different directions. We could keep everyone a lot more focused. So that's just my 2 cents, kind of just dipping into it initially. But I think that this board probably has to have some more conversations around that.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Mike, I'm going to go to you because you were also.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I sort of agree with what Nick's talking about. I think the enthusiasm level is not going to be as it was for the 200th anniversary. I'm quite certain of that. My experience with 4th of July activities, as well. I think if we set the bar too high, we're gonna miss our expectations by quite a lot. We've got time. We've got 4 years or something to get things rocking and rolling. I mean, if we see that level of enthusiasm increase and more people agree to participate, be part of it, then perhaps we could add to the program, but I don't think we should necessarily plan any grand type of celebration too soon, too early into this process. So let's see what we can get for volunteers, first of all. Looking at what Lynn found for us, we dug up in the past, I mean, it was an incredible amount of input from not only residents, but a huge number of businesses in town, for that 200th anniversary. I mean, it would be great if we could equal, that level of participation in town, but I highly doubt it right now. But anyway, just want to sort of set our sights in a reasonable goal.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. Mr. Moran?
No, just gonna listen for a while, see what's going on, because there's a lot to be discussed, and right now I really don't have any questions.
Wayne, I probably should have had this information for you beforehand, but off the top of your head, how many total volunteers throughout the course of the year for the bicentennial did we have available to us? And what kind of money did we raise?
Looking at both the 175th for the town and the 200th, the core, I would say, was probably close to 30. And in the case of the 200th, that divided out into smaller subgroups that were used to plan every activity that we did that whole year. And I have a feeling it was the same way for the 175th. And I am looking at the clock and it says 6:32. Do we want to stop this so you can do the hearing on a timely fashion?
No, we're gonna finish this one up.
Okay, so if you looked at that enormous amount of people, I agree, lifestyles have changed in 25 years. But one thing that I really think needs to be emphasized to include is the school system. You need the kids to get involved. All of a sudden, I'm losing it here. But it was instrumental that the kids picked up on it, and they have the time. But a lot of things have fallen by the wayside in the school system curriculum. And with the country's anniversary coming up, now you're going to have a large scale, which probably will get direction from the feds as to what they're expecting the country to do. And we can pick up on it. Whereas if we do even just I hate to say it, Mike, but we expand a parade for just our 225 years. And that's running on borrowed time to try and get, as Bob will tell you, a large parade that's bigger than what you would have for a 4th of July. And we tried to plan it away from the 4th of July, but we still blew it out of the water. And again, we set the committee up, or the commission actually is what it was called, so that everybody brought everything before it as if it was because it was a spinoff of the Board of Selectmen. So we maintained the same Robert's Rules of Orders. We all voted on it either yay or nay, and everybody had a piece of the moment in time to decide what we were going to do. And having that ability to have that ownership gave them some sort of a desire to be involved as much as they did. And, Maureen's name, she had a group of people that was unbelievable that, put together. I mean, even the ball that we did, we sold tickets 6 months ahead of time. I don't think we can get the Burlington Mall like they did for the 175th, because that's a whole different world now. So, I mean, I could keep going on and on.
All right.
Just one follow-up. There were at the regular meetings of the commission, there were that core group that always showed up. But just as a follow-up, for the parade, we must have had 50 people who volunteered to help set up things, and probably another 50 on the day of the parade. I wouldn't be surprised if we were able to count it out, a good 100 people, because that was a huge parade. Same thing with the moving wall, the Vietnam Veterans Moving Wall Memorial. In the 8 days that it was here, we had volunteers every night, in addition to other things like fundraising and food. So we probably had a good 50 to 75 people throughout the week. So, you know, we're talking 150 to 200 people for those two events alone. And we had something every month in 1999. So other things had a lot more and some had a lot less as far as the volunteers.
And we, if I remember correctly, we started out with $20,000 from the selectmen. And after all was said and done, between the fundraisers and everything else, we gave that $20,000 back into the town. And a lot of the events that we did for fundraisers were picked up, some of them by the recreation department as part of their yearly activities, because it had such a big turnout. So that, like I say, a lot of things had continued on. Yeah, some of them fallen by the wayside, but now I think it's time that we start to plan some kind of a moment in time that isn't around a disaster. It's history that's looked at from a different perspective than what you always read as a history event.
Thank you, Mr. Higdon. Wayne, just one quick thought is maybe you wanted to put that bug in the school department's ear that you're gonna need them in 2 years from now, so maybe they could start gearing something to that?
No, I was just gonna say, that's not Wayne's job. I don't think Wayne is ready to step forward yet.
Not so much Wayne, but somebody should let the school department know that we're gonna be planning to spend, we're looking for student participation. But the other question I have is for Mr. Sagarino is, Paul, can we formally establish a committee without having the makeup of that committee?
Yeah, I would recommend that you put some thought into it and bring it back to the next meeting. And certainly, from our office, we can at least engage the schools in a conversation about the activities and see, what ways that they could participate and help out with it.
So my thought is this: why don't we continue this discussion till February? We formalize the committee, get some work with Wayne and Peter, try to come up with somewhat of a proposition for the committee, and we can formalize it and establish it and go forward with it sometime in February. Does that sound all right with everybody?
Yeah.
All right, Peter and Wayne, or Peter or Wayne, does that sound okay to you guys?
Yep, that's fine. I'm on the Park and Rec's agenda for the 24th, so I'll be discussing it with them then. And I have sent some emails to the school department, but we can continue doing that just to give them a heads up.
All right, so we'll formalize this and bring it to fruition in February as far as formation of a committee.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Wayne.
back to the agenda. Item
363 is a continued public hearing for 92 Middlesex Turnpike. Mr. Sagarino. Just an update for the board. I was virtually attended the planning board meeting last week, and they have started the process of getting their site plan approved. So I know the board doesn't want to see them until they have all their permits in hand. So as they promised at the last time they gave us an update, they have started moving the project forward through the planning board. So I would ask that the board continue that to February 7th on or after 6 p.m. 6:30. Hold on a sec.
We have the 14th, we don't have a meeting on the 7th.
Sure.
Or the 14th and the 28th.
Okay. So the 14th, 6:30? On or after 6?
Valentine's Day? Oh, I can feel the love in the room already.
Okay.
You
So,
all voted.
The recommended motion that the town administrator is looking for is to continue this matter to February 14th on or after 6 p.m. Is that motion, anybody making that motion?
I'll make the motion to continue the public hearing until February 14th at or after 6:30 p.m.
6:30 or
6 o'clock, please.
I'm sorry, 6 p.m., pardon me.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded to continue this matter to February 14th on or after 6 p.m. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained? It's continued to the 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Item 364, it's a continued open meeting. Mr. Sagarino, do you have an update on this one?
I do. Member Hogan had asked town council to review the transaction. She did. She said it's a very basic transaction where the business that owns the license is just changing their corporate structure. There's really no impact on us as a town. There's no impact on operations. She said that the board should feel comfortable in approving that request tonight.
Okay, so this has been opened. The notice has been approved. So at this point,
I also asked Lynn if they had all the paperwork, and at that point, they had not, so have you gotten it since?
They did. They had everything they need.
Thank you, Lynn. Okay, sir.
anything, I'll start with Nick, anything from the board before I go to the public, where this is a public hearing?
No, thank you.
Mr. Hogan, anything further? Joe?
No.
Michael?
No, sir.
Okay, this is a public hearing, so anybody from the public in the room or on WebEx that wants to talk about this agenda item? This is Burlington Wine and Spirits, 43 Middlesex Turnpike. To transfer a license. Okay, seeing none?
Being none out there, I'd like to close the public hearing.
Motion's been made to close the public hearing. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. 500, the public hearing is closed. So now I'll be looking for a motion for approval to transfer from Melvis Enterprise Incorporated to Legendary Spirits LLC.
So moved. I'll make that motion.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Okay, that's approved. 364 is approved. Okay. Item 365 is a new public hearing. It's for earth moving permit, 64A Middlesex Turnpike. I'm gonna call the meeting open. So I do need a motion to approve the notice as written or read into the record.
I'll make a motion to approve it as written. Second.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the notice as written?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained? 500. Okay, I'll start with, yes, Mr.
Chairman,
Chairman.
we'll hear from Eversource here.
Okay,
There's some folks in the virtual meeting. You just raise your hand if you'd like to be identified as to who's going to speak on this.
sir, just identify yourself for the record, please.
Hey, members, can folks hear me first of all?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Joshua Lee Smith. I am outside counsel for Eversource in connection with this matter. And so I promise to be brief tonight in terms of my formal remarks, and then we'll get right into questions. First, what we're seeking this evening is, as you had mentioned, an earth moving permit. This is in connection with a project that involves the temporary placement of what's referred to as a mobile transformer and switcher. This equipment is required at this particular substation, which is located off of Middlesex Turnpike, in order to increase capacity at this substation site. This clearly is an essential service. It is a public utility that is necessary, obviously, for the betterment of the town, the citizens, businesses, inhabitants, residents, and the purpose and need for it is really to increase the capacity because the circuits that are there now are at risk of being overloaded during high demand periods, which is during summer months. So the company has done an assessment of the energy usage and consumption of the residents and businesses within the town, and have determined that over the past several years, there's been an increase, a pretty substantial increase in the usage of energy by the town. And the company has also assessed that it anticipates that there will continue to be an increase annually with respect to the load growth in the town, based on the types of businesses that are coming to the town, businesses that are growing within the town, development that's occurring. It's a lot of robust activity that's happening within the town of Burlington. And all as a result of that, the company it's their obligation to be able to ensure that the energy, that the electric system and grid is reliable, that the company can provide a reliable electric service to the town. And so in order to do that, the existing substation currently is served by two 115 kV, 13.8 kilovolt transformers, both of which are rated at 80 MVA or million voltage amps each. And so what the company is looking to do, as I had mentioned, increase that capacity by 30% by installing this temporary mobile transformer and switcher, which will add 30% increased capacity and will add a total of 50 MVA as a result of this equipment. In order to do that, they need to expand the existing substation as it exists today. And all of this will, as I said, will increase capacity, provide stability with respect to the network, and frankly, avoid blackouts and potential brownouts during those peak periods. Now, the substation itself, I'll talk a little bit about the substation and the neighborhood. This property, I'm sure the members are very well aware, is in a commercial corridor of the town. However, the property itself, this parcel is located within an IG district. It's within a general industrial district, IG zoning district, as well as a water resources district. The property itself has been used for this purpose, for this unmanned electric substation use since 1960. So going back all the way from 1960, it's been in operation for over 60 years, being utilized for this purpose. And the infrastructure there, as you can see from the street view, is large, it's bulky, but again, it's been there for decades. The good news is that this project, based on the layout and configuration of the existing equipment that's there now, and the existing security fencing that's there now, this project is going to be occurring in the rear portion of the site, out of sight from any cars that may drive by, any people that may be walking along the sidewalk, any businesses that they may be across the street from this location. And I'll also underscore this property is not located within anywhere in close proximity to any residences. The closest resident is over 1,000 feet away. So the project itself is going to be occurring in the rear portion of the site, over 100 feet from the edge of pavement of the street of Middlesex Turnpike, not within view. The other benefit here is that, in terms of site impacts, is that the property, the substation, is on an elevated grade. So it is high above the street level. So in order to ever be able to even see this mobile transformer and switcher, one would have to climb up the retaining wall and actually peer through the chain link fence, security fencing, in order to see this equipment. So we believe that the project itself is, while it is absolutely necessary, it's a low impact project on a site that has been there and used for this purpose for decades. The specific permit that we are seeking, as I had mentioned, is an earth moving permit. There will be some excavation that's going to be required as part of this, although it is a temporary mobile transformer that's contemplated here. The rear portion of the site, in order to accommodate this mobile transformer and equipment, is at it slopes down in the back portion of the site. So portion of the site in the rear needs to be leveled off and graded, and a retaining wall needs to be installed in the back in order to allow for a level surface for this mobile transformer to be located and installed. So in terms of earth moving activities, there will be approximately 840 cubic yards that are going to be disturbed as part of the project. Most of that or some of that, I should say, will be reused on the site to the extent practicable. About 500 cubic yards, however, will need to be removed from the site. And I'll just remind folks that the site, if you're not familiar with it, the site is relatively small. It's about 2.2 acres. So there's only so much room for earth to be shifted, moved around, and spoils be reutilized on the site. So a portion of that earth does need to be removed from the site. Of course, the company will utilize best management practices insofar as construction management is concerned. Any stockpiling that may occur with respect to soils or and dust suppression, sedimentation controls, and site security, roadway dirt prevention, tracking devices will all be utilized and or installed in accordance with the company's best management practices and overall construction mitigation efforts to avoid any type of environmental impacts in connection with this project. We have, the company is actively looking to start this work as soon as possible. Again, I had mentioned the summer months, those being the periods during which there's the more demand for energy is highest for electric energy. And so the company certainly wants to be able to have its contractors ready to mobilize and to be able to start this work so that this work can be, the mobile transformer can be installed and ready and energized by the time of the summer. And of course, again, this is clearly something that's for the public good and will benefit the businesses and folks of the town with respect to overall electric reliability. Lastly, I just do want to say that I do have other colleagues and representatives of the company who are also on this call. And if you have any questions that I cannot answer, I will defer to my team. And so I'll just leave it up at that point to the board and the general public if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Is there anybody else representing Eversource that wants to add something other than what Joshua Smith already told us? Or Mr. Smith is going to offer more different information, or they there for answers only?
Mr. Chair, I think at this point, we'd be happy to entertain any questions that the board may have.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Runyon.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm familiar with the site. I know I was up there with the fire department several years ago, with tricky little electrical fire to try extinguish. Yeah, it looks almost 60 years old, that facility up there, and I'm surprised they haven't been here sooner for upgrades, honestly. I have I guess more of a request than a question. I know you mentioned you're going to extend the existing chain link fence. Did you give any consideration to replacing the existing chain link fence and perhaps reducing the visibility of that site from the Middlesex Turnpike? It is, as you say, it's 60 years old, and it looks all of that.
Mr. Smith?
So with respect to, and as I had mentioned, my colleagues are on the line as well, so they may want to jump in. But our initial submission, and we've been before both the Conservation Commission as well as the Planning Board in connection with this matter as well, through the chair. And so our initial design with respect to this project, because the absolute focus of the project and impact on the site with respect to this project is entirely in the rear portion of the site. For those who are familiar with the site layout of what we're proposing, the company was not anticipating doing anything with the fencing. I believe the question is probably geared towards more the fencing along the front, along the street. Is that correct?
You're correct. Right.
So unless the security fencing is either in disrepair or beyond its useful life, or in deteriorated condition, the company will typically they'll maintain and repair where necessary. But as you might imagine, this type of fencing is not your ordinary fencing. This is not the type of fencing that may be at your house or my house or your neighbor's house, or even a commercial establishment. This type of fencing, there's much more to the eye that can be seen. There's various ground and intricate highly technical network of grounding and systems that are in place that are utilized in order to make it such that someone going up to the substation does, if they touch the fence, that they don't get electrocuted somehow. And so that grounding is actually, there's grounding infrastructure that's within that retaining wall. Again, for those who are familiar with this site, the front retaining wall, which is relatively high off the ground, it's well above street grade. There's a lot going on, but within that wall with respect to grounding. In addition to that, this type of fencing it's a different type of fencing. The weaving needs to be of a certain size. Oftentimes, depending on
I get it. Let me make it easier for you.
All right,
The frontage should be, how about some landscaping in front of the fence? Just for your consideration. I'm not looking for a yes or a no tonight. It's not gonna change my opinion that, I'm obviously gonna approve your request here. We need we need that energy here in town, but just for your consideration while you're up there doing the other work.
Josh.
So,
Donna Pico, Substation Design Engineering. Would you like me to speak, Josh?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Donna.
I apologize. My video is not working. Is that acceptable for the committee that my video is not working right now?
Yes, it is.
Donna Pico, Substation Design Engineering. And we were presented in front of the planning board last Thursday night. As Josh mentioned, the original project did not incorporate changing the fence in the front or having landscape in the front. But based on the meeting on Thursday, we are going back to the drawing board. I've dug up all the codes of what and standards and specifications of what we build our fences to. And we're looking at the best of the best, what I call best in show that we could possibly have that would meet all the guidelines and standards. So the answer to your question is yes, we are definitely assessing replacing the frontage fence as well as the front side and that parking lot area. And we are also considering putting landscaping in this, the in-house Eversource is like just finding this out as well, because we worked over the weekend based on the Thursday meeting to see whatever we could do to help make the frontage look better. And we're considering flanking, say, the side of that retaining wall with a low shrubbed area, which would add greenery to that side as well. So did that answer any questions?
No, Donna, thank you very much. I appreciate your answer.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rainey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of quick questions while we're on that subject. You were in front of the planning board last week, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What did they say about the barbed wire on top of the fence? What were they requesting? I mean, we can approve this, but you still have to you're gonna have to go through the process of the planning board, I'm assuming, right? Right, Mr. Sagarino?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, through the chair, yes. We still, the planning board, we're continued with respect to the application that we have before both the planning board as well as the Conservation Commission. In terms of the barbed wire that was mentioned, I think there's, respectfully, not everyone understands the constraints with respect to these types of substations, and even with respect to fencing and the grounding and everything that Donna had just mentioned. There are certain site clearances that are required.
Josh,
yes.
If you want, I can actually speak the specifics because I've almost mastered the codes this weekend.
All right, Donna, take it away.
Refer to the expert here. Donna, go ahead.
Okay, so at your site, you have, as you know, on the sides, 7 foot with 1 foot of barbed. Per the code, and per our standards, it's recommended 8-foot fence. Per the NESC, the requirement is total height is required to be 7 feet. And the 7 feet can consist of 6-foot chain, 1-foot bobbed. And the NESC actually leans towards the bobbed. However, though, I understand the bobbed makes it looks like a penitentiary. So we can remove the bobbed. However, you'd have to really look at that fence to like see what I'm about to say. The front fence on that wall is the 6-foot chain with 1-foot bobbed on top of it. And the only thing I can think is that maybe years ago when they were doing that, it was requested that the fence on top of the wall be as low as possible to make up that 7 feet, which is required by the NESC, which is the National Electric Safety Code. And that's what these substations all fall under. So what we are proposing, though, is in the front, remove the bobbed and have it all chain close weaved in the front, removing the bobbed.
And at a height of
All
what?
right, so my next question is, what are you parking there? You're parking trucks in the back? Are there gonna be trucks parked out there? Or is it just gonna be for this service that you're trying to put in there? Or trying to reconfigure?
So I can let you know that
Josh, can you take that one, or Donna?
Somebody take it, please.
Josh, take that one.
this is an unmanned electric substation. So the visitors to the site are limited to employees or contractors coming to the site for testing, inspection, et cetera. So there's aside from construction activities, there's very limited activity of vehicles coming to and from the site. In order to access the property, there's access directly from Middlesex Turnpike. And along that road, you enter the site from Middlesex Turnpike, go up the elevated grade, and there's a sort of a landing area where vehicles can park. Vehicles can also at the gate, and then vehicles can also, if they need to, go inside the gate in order to access certain equipment with specialized vehicles.
But my question was, you're not gonna be parking anything there overnight. It's not gonna be a holdover for, it's just contractors that are going into their work and then they're leaving at nighttime?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. That's my answer. One more question. Most of these times when we get site plans like this, it says section C, attachment site photo. I don't have a site photo of what that was, so I don't know where that came from. My other thing is this. Every time we've done an earth removal or earth removal that you call it, we always get a plan on the route they're taking in case dirt comes off of that truck or something's wrong and something happens along the route, and that we don't have. So I need to have some type of a route of when you're going to remove that earth to come from that site and where is it going? Just which road are you taking? How are you getting there? And which one of our roads are you going to be constantly on, just in case something happens to that truck and dirt comes off of that truck?
Understood. So generally speaking, one benefit here is that this is not a substation that's within a residential property or where you have to traverse through residences in order to get to the site. This site is, I'm sure folks understand, is directly off of I-95. So the general access would likely be, would involve I-95. However, I do need to indicate, and I'm mindful of the fact that we did not submit a truck routing plan. That was intentional because we don't yet have, the company does not yet have a contractor who would ultimately be the one who would determine, working with the town, working with DPW and the police department, in devising a traffic management plan. So we would respectfully request of the board that, and we're fine with having it be a condition, that a suitable, appropriate truck routing plan be mutually agreed upon between the company and the contractor and the town. But I can say that the company would seek to use diligent efforts to have its contractor utilize all major commercial roadways in connection with any trucks going to and from the site.
Mr. Segrano, would that be feasible that they could do that afterwards, after we approve this? Or is that something that would be,
Yes, so you could put that as part of your approval, that you want that submitted prior to.
because whether or not it goes into the residential or the commercial side of our town, it's still going across our roadways, one way or the other, however you look at it. Whether it's residential or commercial, it's still going across our roadways. And if something was to happen on one of our roadways, we'd like to know that it was one of their trucks, not something else.
Absolutely, you could make it that a condition of your approval.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm good.
Mr. Hogan?
I don't have any specific questions, but I just want to piggyback my comments on the fencing and that whole discussion. And Donna, I want to thank you for picking up the mantle and learning everything that you did. But I also want to thank whoever on the planning board got you guys to take a second look at that. I've heard 60 years mentioned as a length of time. I don't know if it was for the old one or the new one, but those fences aren't going to last another 60 years. And at some point, you're going to have to do the work. So why not do it now? And come back to us with that information. Let's not do this on the cheap. You're spending an awful lot of money for this. Why not do it right the first time? And then we don't have to, keep coming back to it over the years. That's my only comment.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Mr. Priest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So yeah, I agree. So visibility, definitely something I'd like to look at. Truck route, my question actually has to do with the fact that we don't talk to you guys very often. So my question is, how does this substation generate electricity?
Donna? Donna, would that be?
Yes, I can talk to that. Absolutely. There's transmission lines, the lines that are up high, the ones that come into the station. There's two lines. So what happens is that's at 115 kV, which is 115,000 volts. You need to get it to your houses at 120 volts, 240 volts, stuff like that. So in order for us to get that from 115 kV to 120 volts at your house, we need to tap off the high lines, put it through a transformer where it goes from 115 to 13.8. Then we put it on the distribution streets, and that's what's out on the poles at 13.8. Then there's little transformers, those gray cans that are on top of those poles on the streets. They turn it from 13.8 to what goes to your house. Did that answer your question?
It does, Donna. Thank you. And the reason that I asked that question is because I was actually curious about whether or not we were generating electricity at this station specifically, and we're not, which is great to hear, because I'm hoping that means that the people of Burlington aren't going to hit a full 25% on their new bill coming in the state legislature passed. I think that's insanely egregious and completely unfair. Since I've got people on the call who can hear me say that, I want you all to hear me say that I think that that's crazy. And that because this is a substation relay transferring from 115 kV down to 120 volts through the pole and everything else, that these improvements won't affect the residents of Burlington the way the rest of the eastern part of the state might be affected by the need to increase to 25% for your needs to create electricity. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. I just want to acknowledge, Brenda, I see your hand is up. I'll get you in a minute. I can't help, Burlington, we always try to beautify things, and to follow up what the other members have stated. And to Mr. Hogan's point of the fence isn't going to last another 60 years. I know we can't require it, but I'm asking on behalf of me to do something aesthetically pleasing, maybe a facade, or to just, because as you stated, it's 60 years old and it still looks 60 years old. So it would be nice, to not beautify, but at least make that area not look as bad as it does. So Donna, thank you for letting us know that there is somewhat of a plan in place.
that's about it. I'm gonna turn this over to the public for any input. Brenda, I know your hand is raised. Do you want to go?
Thank you, Chair Tigas. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Brenda Rappaport, for the record, Chair of the Planning Board. Eversource presented in front of us last Thursday. We've expressed a sincere desire to improve the plot of land. Anything that was 60 years ago should not be what is presented in 2022. We've asked for a landscaping, a rendering of a best-in-class landscaping scenario for this property. I also want to thank you, Donna, for doing your research. As you know, we want the best aesthetics as possible. We do look forward to your presentation at the next planning board, but at one point we did talk about how this extension reaches to other communities. Have you done that research at this point in time?
All right, Donna, I'll turn that question over to you.
So I believe you're referring to the statement about other substations tying into this substation. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So I look at this project as adding another transformer to that existing station, which will change the 115 that we talked about into 13.8 and go into your streets in Burlington. I heard someone earlier, I think it was the policeman mention, or a fireman mentioning how he was at the site several years ago for a fire. I think I was at that same site at the fire, because pretty much when things like that happen, Burlington Mall goes down. So in other words, my point is, and I apologize for going off track here, that Burlington station on Middlesex Highway gives the power to Burlington. And as far as the other stations they were talking about that night, that is something that they look at for street switching from other areas in order to provide capacity to you if it's not able to be provided from your Burlington station.
Okay, so I guess my follow-up to that is we're supporting the Burlington Mall, which is a high revenue property. And is for folks that weren't present for the planning board, we're supporting Lexington and Woburn, and to ask for the fencing and the landscaping and the aesthetic appeal that we desire for, this isn't a 60-year-old property. This is a 2022 property. This should be, the best in class that we ask for. And this is why we should be supporting, the request that we present. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. Donna, any follow-up with that?
Nope.
If I may, just go ahead, Donna.
Just, Donna, go ahead. You had nothing?
I have nothing to add, but I do think it was a misunderstanding, Brenda, that this station supplied power to, say, the Lexington. It's one of those situations where the Lexington station, the Woburn station, and the Burlington station all feed into the distribution system.
I thank you for clarifying that, Donna. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak about this? Seen anything? Okay. Nothing further from the public.
Motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, motion been made.
Discussion.
Oh. One discussion.
Yeah. I'm not sure I'm ready to vote to close it. I'd like to see some of these things, the maps that Joe's asking for, and a little more clarity on the things you were concerned about. I'm not ready to close it and take a vote on it tonight.
We can continue it. So Did you still have that motion?
The public portion of it.
Motion.
My apologies, yes.
Mr. Chair, may I ask,
Smith, go ahead.
what's the item that's missing? You mentioned a map?
I have it. I got the map, I got the site map in, exactly where it is, what's going on, what you're doing over there. It wasn't in my backup, and I'm sorry if I did something wrong.
Okay,
So the map is not a non-issue at this point.
okay.
Um,
I mean, in terms of the beautification components that have been raised and the aesthetics, I understand that. I do want to point out that when I mentioned that the substation goes back to 1960, it's not to say that the equipment there is all from the 1960s. That's absolutely not the case. The site has been obviously upgraded over the years, and equipment has been swapped out, replaced, and technology has changed, and it's not the same site that it was back in the 1960s. That all being said, we completely understand both the planning board as well as members that have spoken this evening from the select board for the desire to make the site look as nice as possible. We've made diligent efforts since that meeting with the planning board. We heard loud and clear, and Donna and her team are working diligently to, within the confines of the restrictions and the constraints of the site itself, which is kind of a challenged site. It's an above grade site. There's a retaining wall right there that cannot be relocated. So the placement of where that fencing is today cannot change. It cannot be set back. There are clearance requirements. So within the confines of the site constraints as well as the code constraints, and there are numerous regulations and codes that are subject to these types of sites for security reasons, for safety reasons, etc. That all being said, the company is working to come up with the best solution that they can within reason, given the fact that we were not contemplating this. Again, the project, we're looking to put a temporary mobile transformer in the back of the site where it's not even going to be seen. That's where the project is. And it's the fencing across the front, the company is agreeable to replacing that fencing. The company is also willing to enhance the site with some additional landscape plantings where they can make room for those plantings. Again, all within the confines of regulations, both local, state, and federal, in terms of where things can go. We would ask, however, respectfully, if this board could close the meeting, and we would respectfully request that the board entertain a motion to approve this earth moving permit. We're still before the planning board. We're still before the Concom. I think the Concom is pretty much satisfied. But you know, we're going to go back to the planning board. Ms. Rappaport, thank you for attending this evening, and you know, echoing the comments that were made during the planning board session. But this is an earth moving permit, and we feel like we meet all the criteria with respect to that specific permit, and the aesthetic aspects that were requested by the planning board and some members of this board. I think it'll be covered by the planning board. So again, it is a time sensitive project. It's a type of site and a type of work that is not a typical type of a project. I represent all kinds of third-party developers that are not in the public utility business, and essential services, Eversource, National Grid, these types of providers are subject to a number of different regulations that others are not. So this project has to go out to bid. There's a long process in terms of being able to finalize, make all these plans, constructability drawings, that there's a timeline that's involved. And then of course the commencement of the construction, which will take some time. There's excavation work that needs to be done. The labor market with respect to construction is not very swift these days. Labor is difficult and expensive to find, and we need this. The town really needs this energized by the summer. We've met with town officials for over a year regarding this project, and the need, and have met with other companies, a lot of the large employers within the town that rely on this and that are fully supportive of the company making these types of system improvements to benefit them, to benefit their employees, to benefit the residents. And we feel like this is a time-sensitive project, and I would respectfully request that this be approved this evening by this board.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Hold on one second, Joe. Michael had a motion. I wanted to see to close the public hearing. But if Bob had mentioned not being comfortable and continuing it, we can't close the public hearing. We're going to continue it. So.
Can't continue it.
So.
If we're opposed to continuing, we could close the public hearing. I think the public.
You can close the public comment part of the hearing and still continue it, Mr.
Okay, so we can
For
close
our
the public
discussion, yeah.
comment. All right. So was that your intent?
My motion is to close the public hearing.
Okay. So it's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing / comment section of this item. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstained, 500 to close the public portion of this hearing. Any further discussion?
I'm satisfied, Jim, with, I didn't realize Brenda was on board. I'm confident that planning board is the fencing and landscaping is in more capable hands with the planning board than with this board. I'm satisfied that they'll stay on top of this and come to a reasonable conclusion. I'm willing to approve the earth removal permit. Joe's got his maps, his truck route maps, and well, we don't know final destination, but at least we know the route. So
No, we don't.
you said you had a route map.
I have a map of the site plan. I don't have a map of the.
Okay.
Joe, any additional comment?
Yeah, I'm not happy. I'm not happy with this right now. I want to see a few things done. I want to see what the planning board does. You're telling me that this is under pressure for us to approve this. You just said you've been doing this for a year ago. You should have came in front of us earlier. I'm sorry for that. That's not my issue. So I'm in regards to pushing this off until it's done with the planning board and everything else.
Thank you, Mr. Moretti. Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, Joe just stole I made a note here about being time sensitive. Yeah, I mean, I dislike when we get these requests time sensitive, and they've been working on it for a year, but this is the first we hear of the request. So I can't be swayed by the fact that it's time sensitive. It's up to you guys to get the work done.
Thank you, Mr. Hogan. Mr. Priest?
Paul, what is the timing? Like, well, maybe to Mr. Smith, what's making this so time sensitive that's right at this juncture now?
I'm sorry. The question is, what makes this so time sensitive?
Correct.
Well,
In as few words as possible.
yes. So I go back to the fact that this is a unique type of a site for a unique type of a use. This is not the development of a retail establishment or a small shopping.
Mr. Smith, sorry, you're starting back at A and I need you at G. So let me reframe the question. Your timeline from this point forward, with your assumption that this board would approve this earth moving permit, is what?
I would request if either the project manager or someone on the team speak to the specific time frame with respect to commencement of construction and anticipated energization. I believe that's your question, correct?
Who would be that person then, if it's not?
I'm reaching out to the team. I don't have them in person here.
Hey, Josh, how you doing? Good evening, member of the board. Jeff is on. My name is Jeff Ciceron. I'm the project manager on this project. And the sensitivity of this project is in relation to the fact that the Burlington station is at its max. At any time now, we could face some issue when it comes to power. And the mobile transformer is a temporary solution while we put in a new substation within the town of Burlington. So that's the sensitivity of it. And we would like to address it before the summer. As we all know, during the summer, the peak load goes up in lieu of going down.
Okay.
Nick, anything else?
So just to follow up, two quick things, just want to affirm what, Mr. Moretti and Mr. Hogan are saying that, if we are at that critical of a juncture, how we got to this point in terms of timing makes me think that Eversource did not properly back up its own timeline to remediate the situation sooner, which concerns me. In terms of the earth moving itself, I have no issue with it. But, between the 5-minute answers, Mr. Smith, that just kind of seem to circle around themselves and the confusion around the truck mapping, I'm just generally concerned for the project itself. And, again, I appreciate everything that Donna and, the last gentleman, I believe your name was Jeff, I can't see the screen from here, everything you're doing for the project, but I mean, 101 of project management, right, is don't wait until day 10 to solve the problem, right? Start at day 1. So I'm just a little concerned from that perspective. I will, approve the earth moving because along with Mr. Runyon, I believe that the planning board can, manage this through. But I am concerned, generally that this project is already kind of off the rails when it should have been dealt with 2 years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. So my comment is that, as Selectman Hogan stated, as Mr. Smith has stated, that you've been in discussion with the town for over a year. Now, all of a sudden, it's urgent. That's not our fault. The urgency isn't created because of the town. The urgency is created because you're just now asking us. After, even while being in discussion with the town for over a year, now I need it now. Well, I tend to agree with waiting to be 100% comfortable with this before voting on it. So I will probably also vote to continue it, but that's just me.
Oh, at that point, I'd like to make a motion to continue this.
The motion's been made to continue this matter
After the next planning board.
to February 14th. On or after 6 o'clock, because it's a public hearing. You have to be time specific, Joe.
Okay.
So the motion's been made to continue this matter to February 14th, on or after 6 p.m. Is there a second to that motion? Second is by Mr. Hogan. All those in favor of continuing this matter to the 14th? Aye. Opposed? 3-2, the matter is continued to February 14th, on or after 6 p.m. Thank you, folks.
Your time.
Okay, next item on the agenda is 366. It's a public hearing for small cell wireless public right of way at 1 Burlington Mall Road. So I'm gonna open this public hearing and looking for motion to approve the notice as written.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
It's been approved, moved and seconded to approve the notice as written. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstain. Okay, 500. I believe we have an attorney.
Mr. Chairman, it's Attorney Parry. And we also have Town's Council on Small Cell, Donna Brewer is here, as well as the town's RF engineer, Dave Madison, is here for any questions.
Okay, I just want to thank Dave and Attorney Brewer for attending. Mr. Parry?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Happy New Year. I was here about, well, it's been 8 or 9 months now where we did the first small cell installation in the town of Burlington, and possibly I'm here for the second. Is it okay to share my screen?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Everybody see our plans?
Yes.
Great. So similar to the last application that was approved back in April, AT&T is once again proposing a small cell facility. We typically look for utility poles or existing structures in the right-of-way for these sites. Like with the last node, as we refer to them, along Burlington Mall Road. There aren't any electric utility poles to attach to. There are a couple of light poles, and I'll run through those momentarily in our photo simulations. But at the last hearing, there was the town had decided not to use town-owned light poles, so we're proposing an additional pole in the right-of-way. So the project site is at Burlington Mall Road. It's near the intersection with Cambridge Street. I'm going to scroll down. I hope I don't get anyone nauseous. The location that we're proposing, so just for perspective's sake, here is Cambridge Street, Burlington Mall Road. There's a traffic light here at the intersection. We're proposing to put the small cell facility between two existing light poles, just up probably 60 or 70 feet up Burlington Mall Road from the intersection with Cambridge. And this is the location here. It'll get better depicted as we go. So Cambridge Street runs north to south in this direction, and Burlington Mall Road. As with the last application, we are placing or propose to place the small cell facility equidistant between the two existing street light poles. So there'll be 60 feet, 120 feet between the two existing poles. We'll locate our installation at 60 feet to keep it equidistant from the two existing. This is probably somewhat familiar to the board. It's a proposed 25-foot metal pole. The antenna canister is up at the top to a total height of 30 feet above ground level. There are radio concealment module just below the antennas. Then we have the steel shaft, which is the pole itself. The radio equipment will be installed inside the pole, as with the electric meter and power module. There'll be a foundation for the pole, typical with lights, but in this instance, there will not be a light on the pole. It's consistent with the last application. If you give me 1 second, I'm going to switch, I hope. So photo rendering. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
So this is Cambridge Street here, Burlington Mall Road. These are the two existing light poles that I was referencing. This is AT&T's proposed installation between the two existing light poles. Just to give a point of reference, again, site location here, we'll be reviewing from location 1 to reviewing down Burlington Mall Road towards Cambridge Street. This is the existing conditions. We're over 500 feet from any residences. It's a pretty highly developed industrial commercial area, not far from the interstates. As I said, this is existing with 2 streetlights. And as we had in the last rendering, here's the proposed. We decided to match the color as we did last time. I think we used black last time because there was some black town-owned light fixtures. On this instance, we're suggesting that we just go with a gray metallic color similar to these Cobra lights. I have one more screen I'm going to try.
Isn't it? Man, at some point, they continue to balance it.
Can you see this aerial overview?
Yes, we can.
Right. So this is where the red circle is and the little black dot. That's where the proposed location is. These are the radio frequency coverage maps that we provided with our application materials pursuant to the town's policy. Just nudged over a little bit. So as we discussed previously, I mean, AT&T's preference is to get everybody to green. That's high connectivity with high data rates. As you'll see, there is this portion of Burlington Mall Road that isn't quite up to snuff. It's high connectivity, but moderate to low data rates. You'll see it actually, there's actually a pretty pronounced degradation in service here between the blue, which is moderate data rates, and the green, which is obviously what AT&T designs to. So this is existing coverage, and the next slide will be proposed coverage. So you'll see the area where it's kind of orange, reddish, goes mostly green and includes blue, so you get good solid connectivity, provides the capacity for AT&T's network, and basically does what a small cell is designed to do. As part of the package, we filed numerous materials. There is a compliance report from Don Hayes, which indicates that the facility will be well within the FCC standards for emissions. And in fact, it'll be 5.44% of the 100% max. I did see, looking through the board's packet today, the report from Isotrope Wireless. I see David Maxon is also attending virtually. The one question that was open was who was going to own the pole? And it's a good question, because at the time I filed the application, we weren't quite sure. Typically, AT&T assigns these nodes to someone to construct and own the pole. Typically, we are attaching to utility poles. The utility company owns it. Alternatively, we attach to municipally owned infrastructure, but as I said, based on our recent experience, the town was not interested in using municipal equipment in the right-of-way. So we're going to use Centerline Communications, LLC, and the site has been assigned to them, as was the last site in Burlington. They are registered with the Department of Telecommunications and Cable to use the public right-of-way and provide services that AT&T will use. So AT&T does not typically own its towers or these facilities in the right-of-ways, because this is an entirely new structure in the right-of-way. We need someone licensed by the Massachusetts Department of Telecommunications and Cable to own the site. So it'll be own the facility. So that'll be Centerline Communications. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions. We did file a rather robust response to the town, and all of this information should be in your packets. We do have some folks here if there are any specific questions, either from Don or David. I also have Don Hayes here if there are questions with respect to emissions. And with that, I'll open up the questions if that's what the chair finds appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Thank you.
Board on this end, Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You must have seen me doing my little tracing exercise.
Yes, I did.
So apologies for the distraction. Mr. Perry, I'm going to make a small, just outward request moving forward that the maps, the coverage maps, don't look like a Doppler from 5,000 feet away. Given the tight proximity of the effect of these poles' coverage, it was very difficult to actually make out what was being covered, or at least make the overlay more visible, because I had to shine my phone flashlight through and then trace it over the map so I could actually see what was actually being covered. Because the question is, why are we putting a pole here?
Well, I mean, the network is not running and providing the service that AT&T is looking to provide to its customers. Just from do you have color printouts, or are you looking at black and whites?
No, I've got color printouts, and so I see the green, but in terms of what the green was overlaying was very difficult to kind of make out. And so I couldn't tell, because again, when we're erecting these things and we're talking about coverage, I ask myself, okay, well, who's going to be benefiting from the coverage, right? And I understand we're trying to create a more holistic network so that the customers have, more convenience of not connecting and disconnecting and having service, yada, yada. But when I look at this overlay, I see that we are covering basically the intersection, the parking lot of the Marriott, a little bit of Mall Road and some swampland next to 95. I have that question, who's standing there looking for coverage? I mean, I know that that light's long, but I don't just, like in terms of like the functionality of network coverage, I'm just wondering why this was a choice location for your second spot in Burlington.
Mr. Perry, you want to take that? Or have someone else that wants to take it?
Sure, I'll take, our radio frequency engineer, Kevin Brewer, was not feeling well today, so he's not available, but, and I think maybe David could also speak to it, but if you look at the sort of orange reddish colors, and I've shared my screen again, hopefully you can see it, I've zoomed in a little bit. Basically, you know, we're looking for green, obviously, you know, blue is, you know, something that's acceptable in the entire area, but, you know, you have customers that will be in this area. They may be, you know, stuck in traffic, people in the parking lots. This is much more of a capacity issue for the networks. So, you know, we have coverage, which you can see in the red and the orange, but we don't have robust coverage. And AT&T is looking to, you know, provide coverage that's up to its customer standards. You know, our ultimate preference is green, and that's what we designed to. But you know, between the green and blue colors, and I'm just going to scroll down here, you'll see that, you know, this area that's not green and blue fills in.
Right.
So none of these small cells are going to produce a significant footprint of coverage. I mean, we're looking at hundreds of feet, not miles. So it's a, you know, one canister antenna at a low height. We're not dealing with, you know, high structures like water tanks or towers. So it's a discrete issue for the network, and you know, the coverage will be robust in this area once this small cell facility is installed.
Right. No, I get that. You know, and I mean, seeing the rate of connectivity increase from one MAC to the other is something that I'm perfectly capable of reading on my own. I get that. I guess, again, it's the particular location that confuses me, right? Like when you think about high traffic areas where customers are going to be in Burlington, if you said we're going to drop it in this intersection to provide coverage to people in their cars, that particular parking lot and the swamp, I'd say, geez, there are at least 10 other places I can point to in town where people are going to want better, like, so like, again, like list of priorities in terms of like, hey, we're going to, you know, increase connectivity for our town. This particular location kind of falls like mid to low on that list in terms of like where AT&T can be boosting connectivity. And again, like I stand here full well realizing that, like, you know, based on federal laws that we aren't allowed to do a fair number of things when it comes to this particular thing. I just like, if you're going to drop these things in our town to increase, you know, connectivity, let's pick a better location than this one. That's just my 2 cents. So.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Mr. Perry, I think, was it Mr. Hayes that has his hand up? I wanted to respond.
Good evening, everybody. Don Hayes, independent consultant. I did prepare a report that had more to do with the compliance of the site with FCC regulations, but as my very good colleague, David Maxon would agree, I believe, anytime you introduce an additional site, whether it be a macro site or a micro site or a femto site or even a small hotspot, what you're doing is you're taking the load off of the entire surrounding area and allowing those other facilities, those outer facilities, to better serve the customers outside of where that new facility is. And so I would just like to point out that you can't just look at the microcosm of where the facility is, but the overall picture of the network is what the RF engineers are looking at. And that's pretty much all I had to say on it.
Thank you, Mr. Hayes. Mr. Priest has a follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hayes, thank you for that, and I appreciate it. But again, you know, to reduce load, you're picking an area where people are constantly moving in their vehicles. So I mean, I would actually be curious to know what the load is and what the load decrease would be to the overall, you know, area, if in fact that's like a high load area. Again, I'm probably just holding up the whole conversation here, but you know, it just seems like a lower priority location thing. So I can drop it at that for the sake of the overall conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Priest. Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, but I won't, Nick. No, and I'm not gonna relate this at all, but Nick is right. I mean, we're lay people here and you can dazzle us by telling us what's going on over here. But there had to have been several locations where you could have come to us with more in need than this one. You know, I'm just a country farmer.
Well, let me also, you know, AT&T prioritizes the network, obviously, and, you know, has limited resources and budgets. As I explained last time, this is an area that's high traffic, high volume. It also, as Don said, also offloads, you know, some traffic from the existing macro sites. But, you know, we're also looking at commercial areas. I mean, the way you've set up your, you know, small cells facilities, you know, we stay out of residential areas. I'm sure we're going to be in them, as I said last time, but we are, you know, in a situation where we're trying to follow the rules. AT&T is funding this site and investing the resources. You know, as I said, the approximate cost of this, $25,000. I don't think they would be spending $25,000 unless they felt that, you know, there was a need in their network to, you know, resolve an issue. But with that, you know, I agree. There are lots of places that, you know, could use coverage. In this instance, the small cell fits nicely into a very high traffic demand area.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. All set? Mr. Morandi?
All set.
Mr. Ryman?
Just a minor point. I know in the drawings, the streetlights in that area where they're proposing the location. I believe it is our intent over a period of some time to have all of those streetlights of the architectural design in a color black. So I would suggest that their pole meet those future design criteria.
Mr. Perry, did you get that?
Yeah, we have no, I mean, it could be any color. We were just trying to match what was there. But, you know, as I said, the last time there was, you know, black lights in the area. If you prefer it to be black, we'll make it black.
Yeah, Mr. Sagarino, does that need to be conditioned to the approval? Yeah, we could put that in the conditions. Ed, if our intention is to replace those streetlights with one similar to the last installation, so
Okay.
to the extent that the pole could look as the previous pole did, I think that would be what the board would be looking for. Mr. Hogan has a follow-up?
How's that going to affect the timing of that work that we're doing with what you're doing?
Unless you're going to do it soon, I think we'll be done first. Is this something that's on your agenda to do soon?
Yes, it is. So as long as AT&T were to go through the engineering department to get all their permits and approvals, they should be able to coordinate that work. Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll need either electrical or building permits and DPW approval for our utilities that will be coming in. So, you know, I agree. This is the first step. I didn't realize these poles were going to be replaced, so we would have proposed black like last time. That's, you know, color's not an issue.
Okay, follow up, Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, and that's fine, and thank you, but what if you are ready to do it before we are? Are you gonna put the black one up there and then come back and change it when we change the pole, or are you gonna have to wait?
No, we'll put the black one up.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking us to do.
Change it.
No, it's gonna go from gray to black.
Yeah, and you'll come back and change it if we're not ready.
No, it's gonna be black.
No,
Yes, but you're putting the black up not on the black pole. If we're not ready to put the black poles in, will you come back and change when we put the new poles up?
It's a freestanding pole.
they're putting their own pole up.
We're gonna put our own.
Okay.
We're gonna put I mean, it sounds like what you're asking us to do is to, match the black color that will eventually be there for the town poles. So we'll go with black. We won't need to change it.
Okay, all right.
All right, anything else from the board? Mr. Severino?
Mr. Chairman, would you mind asking if our experts have any questions of AT&T? We have them here on the line, Ms. Brewer or Mr. Max.
I'll start with Attorney Brewer. Attorney Brewer, any comment for the board or the public?
Good evening, board and everybody else. No, I don't have any questions or comments right now.
Thank you. Mr. Maxon, any comments for the board?
Yes, I do. I'd like to give you a brief synopsis of process. So first, we are asked to review the application for completeness within 10 days of the application being submitted. And we're not actually vetting the content of the application at that point in terms of its correctness or accuracy or that sort of thing, but whether or not the applicant has submitted everything that's consistent with the submittal requirements. And so I did note that the application was complete, and I did raise the one question that the regulation requires there to be information about who actually owns the structure. And Mr. Perry has answered that tonight. So now the application is complete. And then I was asked to participate in this meeting. So I think the one key issue that I can review, of course, is the safety issue, and Mr. Hayes's report, which I reviewed, and I agree with his conclusions that the emissions of the facility will be within the FCC safety requirements by a good, healthy margin. The other thing is that there was a question of me by email before this meeting about the whole coverage thing, and maybe I can just describe how that fits in here. The submission requirements call for coverage maps and a bunch of other material as well, but coverage maps, which is all well and good, except that what you members of the board have figured out is that it's not just a coverage problem, that, and Mr. Perry has explained and Mr. Hayes has explained, it's also a capacity problem. So they're trying to get better coverage in places where the coverage isn't very good and where there is apparently a substantial number of users. And as Mr. Hayes explained, if you have an area that is substandard in coverage, like at that intersection, each one of the users at that intersection is using perhaps twice as many resources talking to the cell site that's serving the entire area than they would if they were in a blue zone. And that's because the farther away the user is, the more the cell site has to work to communicate accurately and reliably. So what they do is they look for areas that are busy, that are small, and that have substandard coverage. And that intersection looks like one of those spots. I agree, it would be nice to not only see the wide area map so you get an idea where the cell sites are, but to have a zoomed in version to kind of see what the footprint is doing around the intersection. But if you can imagine that you might be hitting a parking lot with several hundreds of cars, and you might have an intersection where if you've got 20 cars piled up in each direction, plus other traffic, you could have another 100 vehicles constantly changing, but another 100 vehicles within the footprint of this small cell. And if you use your satellite navigation, you know that it's constantly updating your traffic information and constantly recalculating your route to tell you whether you should change your route. Every car that's in that intersection that's using satellite navigation is talking to the internet. It's not just the telephone calls. And there will be other things with connected vehicles in the future where your car will be doing similar kinds of things for traffic management at levels that we're not familiar with today. So what is not transparent to us is why AT&T chose this intersection. But based on those kind of presumptions about the intersection, the fact that it's substandard coverage, it makes a lot of sense why they're proposing that small cell at that location. So I'm comfortable with what they've submitted. Now, the other thing is, and I think this is pretty clear, is that while the regulations ask for coverage maps, the regulations do not ask for proof of need for the facility. That's more for information than it is for making a finding in your decision, as far as I understand the way the regulations are written. So the way that coverage map would help me, and did in the last hearing, was, well, what are they trying to get with this small cell? Where else could we put it if there's some reason why we don't like the location they're proposing for the small cell? What are our options for relocating it? And in that respect, the coverage map is very helpful. But if we don't think we need to be talking about relocating it, then the coverage map is just kind of pro forma, information that's good to have on the record. And with that, I have no questions.
Thank you, Mr. Maxon. Any board questions after Mr. Maxon's comments?
No,
All right. No, good. All right. Before I turn it over to the public, we do have 4 hands raised. And I just want to reiterate that one thing this board has to, one of the reasons that, I'll just put it this way, health and safety concerns are not an allowable reason for denial. So I just wanted to put that out there before we open it to the public. That is, again, we cannot deny something if health and safety concerns, if it's a health and safety concern issue. They're not allowable, it's not an allowable reason for denial. With that, I have 4 names that I see. Brenda Rappaport, I have you down first. You have a comment or a question?
Yes, I actually have several. So I'm wondering why, this is a kind of prime location of town. Why aren't we making this more of like a flagpole scenario rather than just a pole? Why can't we make this more aesthetically pleasing?
Well,
Is there any reason?
Brenda, I'm not sure if our policy would allow something like that, the aesthetic guidelines.
I think it may.
May.
Additionally, there's a couple other questions that I'd like to pose.
Okay, what's the second question?
Is there a removal bond in question?
Yeah, it was submitted.
How much?
5,000.
Hey, Brenda?
Do you think that's sufficient?
To remove the pole, I think so.
Okay. Central Line is the one who actually owns the pole. Why aren't they present?
They did, well, they actually submitted the application with us.
But why aren't they present?
David Ford is here from Centerline.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. Thank you.
Yep.
Are they presenting any ability to co-locate?
No, although I don't know that it would be prohibited. I mean, small cells are typically, one installation. I don't know, or one facility at a time. Whether the pole itself could support another carrier, I think is difficult, if not impossible, just because of the way the designs are. But I guess it could be designed if if we could get them taller. That we are living within certain height limitations. And just to go back to the flagpole, we're in the middle of a very small median strip. We have, I think, 2.5 feet on each side of the pole. So we're proposing something that would, is sleek, if you will, similar to a utility pole. But I don't think putting a flag on it, I mean, I think it's going to draw more attention to it. It's between 2 existing light poles.
Would Centerline be opposed to restricting co-locating without presenting again in front of the select board?
I'm not sure what you mean about you mean bringing in another carrier?
If there was another carrier that was interested in adjoining that pole, would Centerline restrict the use at this point in time, saying AT&T is the only carrier that can use that pole?
As long as we could both function, I think Centerline would be happy to have another tenant on the pole. I mean,
Yeah,
we'll have an
that's
agreement
all
with
we
Centerline.
want. We would
What's
want, I would ask that if there was another carrier that was interested in that pole, that other carrier and Centerline would have to present again in front of the select board. Is Centerline in agreement with that?
If it's physically possible, I'm sure Centerline would be happy to do it.
Well, Centerline's here, so.
Well, I don't think it's physically possible, I guess, is I'll defer to, the town's hired a consultant here. I'd like to get David Maxon's input. The pole that we've designed would have to be replaced and enhanced, that's for sure.
Well, again, and just as a bit of a background, I've been in the telecom industry for about 15 years. So I do have a little bit of industry experience. What's good now may not, what's good now, what's acceptable now may be different than what's 15 years from now or 10 years from now. And as the chair of the planning board, I'm always looking at what's the next best thing. So that's why I asked this question.
Centerline would be all for co-location.
Brent, I'm gonna put you on pause for a second. Mr. Maxon wants to take a swing at that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think it's a great question because co-location is a way to reduce the proliferation of these things. And this is difficult with small cells because they try to be small. In the town of Hull over the last couple of years, the owner of the distributed antenna system in Hull, Extenet, was expanding its network by adding a few poles on Beach Avenue. And they had 9 other poles with equipment on them. Those are shared facilities. I know it's an old thing because it's a distributed antenna system, but they're basically small cells. They have a big canister antenna or some whip antennas on top, and then they have equipment mounted to the utility pole.
Sure.
Thing is to have the equipment of more than one carrier on the pole so that they can share the antenna on top. They need more radio amplifiers on the pole. The pole that AT&T is proposing is designed to conceal the equipment as best as possible within the surface of the pole and the canister on top. If we were to add another carrier to that pole, there might be more space inside, but I don't have the impression there's very much. So it's very likely that the next carrier, if they were to join that pole, would have equipment attached to the exterior of the pole or mounted in a little cabinet on the ground next to the pole, or something like that. So as long as Centerline owns the pole and its arrangement with AT&T is such that it is able to make use of that antenna for more than one carrier, then technically it's possible. But there are some constraints because of the size of the pole, the size of the space, and that sort of thing. So it's not something that's been guaranteed at this point, but I think if, for instance, Verizon were to come in and propose a pole of its own sometime in the future, that would be the first question. Why can't you talk to Centerline and see if you can co-locate on the existing pole? But it's not a question we can really answer tonight.
Through the chair, may I respond?
Certainly, Brenda.
Thank you. So that being said, again, we can look back to, look to like the old REITs, American Tower. Their concept is building, 1, 2, 3 carriers on one simple pole. If Centerline is saying, okay, we're going to have AT&T here right now, all I'm asking is that if Centerline wants to represent AT&T at this point in time, we restrict access. And if they want another carrier to come into play, I don't know what's going to happen 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. But let's restrict it and let them come back to us. That's all I'm saying.
Brenda, hold on one second. I'm going to ask Attorney Brewer, if I'm not mistaken, to add on to anything external onto a current pole would violate our aesthetic standards. Am I correct in assuming that?
You are correct.
Okay, so that can't be done.
All right,
But-
perfect.
With Attorney Brewer, do you have any follow-up to the issues raised by Ms. Rappaport?
I think even without it violating the aesthetic standards, if you're gonna have a carrier added to an existing pole, they're still gonna have to come before you.
Okay, thank you. Brenda, have your questions been answered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
David Maxwell, with one
Yes, David.
code, if I may. You might consider putting in a condition that says that the select board expects that if it is possible, the center line will accept co-location on this pole, that it won't simply deny it outright. But at the same time, that as we just discussed, it still is something that would need to go through a permitting process to have that co-locator. If there's some way to perhaps to state that all explicitly in a condition, so we're making clear our intent tonight for that 10 or 15 years in the future.
Yeah, and for the record, Centerline is not opposed to co-location. And
I'm
that's-
sorry, through the chair.
Brenda?
Centerline is not opposed to co-location, so we don't have a problem with that condition.
Again, through the chair, if we were to accept another tenant, I would expect there would be compensation to the town.
We would, Brenda, whatever we can do through policy and through regulation, I'm sure we'll do. Attorney Brewer, is there a better way to answer that question?
I believe as a permit holder, they are required to pay the town annually.
Yes, that's what I thought. All right, thank you, Attorney Brewer. Brenda, anything else before we move to the next person?
No, thank you very much.
Thanks, Brenda. Tom V. Do you want
Thank you.
to identify yourself for the record, please?
Sure, I'm a Burlington resident. And
Tom, what's your last name?
Valid.
All right.
So I had a few questions, and several questions, please, if I may. And the first question is relates to, I believe it was Mr. Maxon that made reference to the FCC guidelines. And I assume that this is probably well known among the select board now, but if not, it would be certainly a good thing for them to explore. But the current FCC guidelines that are now the foundation for the town's small cell policy have been thrown into suspension. And that is because the FCC was sued. And I believe in August of last year, the DC Circuit Court ruled that the FCC did not do its job. In other words, was negligent in doing its job with respect to its radiation guidelines for cell phone coverage. And the court ordered the FCC to go back to the drawing board and revise your health and safety standards properly. And that included taking into account thousands and thousands of citizen comments, which they did not take into account, and taking into account many, many scientific studies about health and safety.
All right, Mr.
Tom, I understand from Tony Brewer's explanation in the last small cell meeting, I understand that health and safety is off the table, strictly speaking, or at least it was at that particular point in time.
All right, Tom, I'm going to ask for clarification from our attorney regarding the FCC
guidelines are thrown into a state of suspension. We don't know what they're going to come back with.
Okay, I'm going to check with our attorney.
So my first question is, and perhaps this is for Attorney Brewer or whoever, my first question is, since the town's guidelines are based on these FCC guidelines that are now rendered, or what the court has said are not sufficient, how does that affect the town's policy, small cell policy? So that's my first question, and I'd like a follow-up, please.
Tom, hold on a second, Attorney Brewer.
So I am familiar with that case, and what that case did not do is it did not override or overturn the current FCC guidance or standards. So they remain in effect, they remain in place, we remain bound by them, but the DC Circuit did order the FCC to go back and review everything. Until that is done, we are operating under the 1996 standards.
Okay, Tom, that is that question. What was your second question or your follow-up?
Yeah, sure. And this is a question perhaps, I don't know if Ms. Rappaport would want to comment, but while it's fully understood that the town of Burlington does not have jurisdiction over health and safety issues, there are cities and towns in the United States that have strongly applied their zoning laws to regulate the deployment of 5G 5G antennas. So I'm wondering if it might be possible for the town, given the fact that there are significant concerns among some Burlington residents, and some of them unfortunately couldn't be here at this meeting, concerning health and safety. I'm wondering if it might be possible under Burlington's zoning laws to use those to restrict the 5G deployments to non-residential areas.
Donna?
So we've had we did discuss this when we were.
Possible is my question. I mean, I'm not saying are you going to do it? I'm saying, is it theoretically, Ms. Brewer perhaps could, Attorney Brewer perhaps could answer, is it theoretically possible that the town of Burlington could do that?
Tom, she's trying to answer that.
Was I muted? I'm sorry, could you not hear me?
No, you were fine, Donna, go ahead.
Okay, yes, it is theoretically possible. Is that towns cannot regulate the facilities such that they effectively prohibit the service. And given the technological restrictions of the coverage from these facilities, you could have an argument from the industry that prohibiting these facilities within residential areas is effectively prohibiting the service.
Well, I certainly hear what you're saying. Are you familiar, Attorney Brewer, with what's happening in Pittsfield, Massachusetts with respect to Verizon?
All right, Mr. Tom, we're gonna have to stick with the item, the issue at hand.
Okay, I'll be very quick with a final comment, but let me just say in the city of Pittsburgh, Verizon put up a tower that sickened 17 people, and they are suing the zoning board. So I'm just simply suggesting the town of Burlington should consider the possibility. I know you're concerned about the telecom company suing the town, but I'm just suggesting that there may be liabilities from citizens as well, should there be health and safety issues that emerge. Thanks very much for allowing me to make these comments.
Thank you, Tom. Next I have in line is Ruth Wren.
I have no comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. Sally Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions, and one has to do with co-location. My recall from the discussions that I believe were before town meeting was that co-location was a requirement of all, or the potential for co-location was a requirement of all 5G installations. And that was because we didn't want to see multiple little black boxes on all of the poles, or spring up all on all of the poles around town. Is that not correct?
Sally, just a quick question, a quick reply is, if I'm not mistaken, it's co-location when possible. Attorney Brewer, am I correct on that?
Yes.
And Dave Mattson, you wanted to make a comment as well?
Before, but as far as co-location is concerned, I think perhaps the audience might be reminded, if some of the members are not aware of this, is that there are zoning regulations that have these rules about cell towers and macro cells on buildings and co-location and trying to not have lots of cell towers. But if you look at the regulations for small cells, they're much less like zoning regulations and much more like grant of location rules for utility poles. And that's intentional on the part of the FCC, that the carriers enjoy, and their pole companies, their utilities and tower companies, enjoy certain additional protection for getting permission to use the public way to put antennas on poles. So that's why I suggested that if you want to put a condition in there, just to remind everyone and remind Centerline that the town would be interested in any co-location potential on that pole, that might be a good thing to write in. But by and large, yes, co-location is something that all communities expect in order to reduce the proliferation of towers, but it's difficult to do that with small cells. Not impossible, but difficult.
Thank you, David. Sally, did that answer your question, or do you?
That addressed one, and I have a comment about that.
Okay.
And that is that anyone could come in and say, well, we want to put this little tower that doesn't have enough room for someone else. And to me, that's one way to get around the co-location. So someone else, would have to come in and say, well, we want this little pole, and we want that's not big enough to hold anyone else. And so we're going to have just this proliferation of, think of it as little pin cushions all over town with these little black boxes for 5G. But my next point, it goes back to what Selectman Priest had to say about this particular location being kind of to cover the parking lot. I mean, I understand, I have AT&T, I have 5G, and I understand going into that intersection that gets very crowded, and lo and behold, there's a huge demand. But it's not that I'm on my phone. It's not that I require 5G at that intersection, although I can understand people requiring 5G, especially when we get into the issue of self-driving cars. When we get there, I can understand it. But in the meantime, I think that the issue of this particular location leads me to, pardon the cynic, but what's the range of 5G? And will AT&T come back, next month or in 2 or 3 months and say, whoa, well, we need someone down here over at the corner of over by Leahy, because there's a lot of traffic that builds up there, and therefore it looks like there's 5G congestion. So I think that it's something that the town needs to consider, and maybe consider saying, okay, if you want to put up your little box, well, we have light poles. We have utility poles that can be used for this purpose so that we don't have a bunch of little pin cushions just showing up all over town. And that's my concern. I don't object to it because I like 5G. But I do think that, you know, there are things that we can do to think ahead rather than having to address this every 100 feet down the Mall Road or up Cambridge Street or whatever direction we're going. Because the traffic gets congested at some point, and then AT&T and then Verizon and then who else? T-Mobile say, ooh, here we have a lot of congestion here, and we really need to get another, you know, pin in the pin cushion. And that's it.
Thank you, Sal. Just so you're aware, telephone poles are allowed. It's just that happens to be, this is a freestanding pole, but they are allowed on telephone and utility poles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And perhaps what we should do is encourage them to not have freestanding units, but to use our existing hardware.
All right, thank you, Sally. Is there anybody else from the public that wants to talk about this issue, this agenda item? Okay, it looks like no one. So anyone want to make a motion to close the public comment on this, on the public hearing?
I'll do that. Motion to close the public hearing
All
on.
right, moved by Selectman Runyon, is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Hogan, sorry, Mr. Priest. All those in favor of closing the public hearing?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, abstained, 500 to close the public hearing. Okay. Are we gonna discuss this further, or does anybody feel like making a motion, or whatever, anybody from the board? Yes, Mrs. Sagarino.
Mr. Chairman, may I suggest that board consider continuing this to the February 14th meeting, and within that time, we can work together with Attorney Brewer and Mr. Maxon to draw up the proper conditions that we heard tonight, so that you can have a document to vote on at that time.
That's an excellent
The
point.
conditions would be to make it look like a flagpole and no coalition together.
I think we had, it was one about co-locating as
Right.
well as having the color of the pole
Color
turn
of the
black,
pole, trying to make it-
freestanding.
Yeah, okay, okay.
All right, so is there a motion to continue this to February 14th, on or after
Motion.
6 PM? Made by Selectman Morandi. Is there a second? Second by Mr. Hogan. All those in favor of continuing this agenda item to February 14th, on or after 6 PM? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained? All right, February 14th, on or after 6 PM. Okay, next agenda item. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank you.
next agenda item, more of a housekeeping issue. It's a reapproval of the warrant article index, the index of articles. What happened here is we have 3 general bylaw articles that are to go on the town meeting warrant. But in order to do that, we have to add an article to allow for those 3 articles. Didn't back me up here if I'm not. But basically, Article 13 is an amendment to the town bylaws, which will allow Articles 14, 15, and 16 to be put on the agenda. We didn't have that last time. So it's just it's a reapproval of the index of the town meeting warrant articles for January 24th.
So moved.
Moved by Selectman Runyon.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hogan. All those in favor of approving the January town meeting index of articles?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, abstained, 500. Thank you, Lynn. Okay, next item on the agenda, Mr. Denizio, ARPA.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you may remember last fall, we were here to talk about ARPA, just kind of go over what is it, why do we care, how much money are we gonna get? How long do we have to spend it? What's our initial plan? So I'd like to do just a quick recap of that. When we were here in the fall, what is ARPA? ARPA was the second of the second major COVID or coronavirus related funding passed by Congress. Was passed just after the calendar year last year. It was the second source of funding. It's the ARPA stands for the American Rescue Plan Act. Why do we care? Because as part of that act, there was the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery fund. That's what's important to us. That allocated money to counties and to municipalities all throughout the country. We talked about the two allocations we had added up to just over 8.5 million. We talked a little bit about what you can spend it on, fighting the pandemic, revenue replacement, which was a big win for us, and water and sewer infrastructure being the things we were going to concentrate on. How long did we have? We talked about how we can be patient. We have several fiscal years to spend this money. The money has to be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and has to be period of performances through December 31st, 2026. So our initial plan was we were going to earmark some money for fighting the pandemic, for the continued costs of COVID that we see each and every day. And then we also had earmarked $500,000 to do the design of the PFAS projects that had come to us last spring, and it was approved this past fall. And then we were using 1.5 million at a clip of 500,000 a year for this fiscal year, next fiscal year, and the following fiscal year as revenue replacement. And we were happy about that because it allows us to wean ourselves off that as our local receipts, which have been at the time cut pretty drastically, to come back naturally. So that's where we were in the fall. Not much has changed since then. We've allocated that same $3 million out of the 8.5 million. The three things we talked about. We have spent the 500,000 on the design study for the PFAS project. That's moving along pretty fast. We've transferred the first year of the 500,000 for revenue replacement into our operating budget when we set the tax rate, and we've been spending a little bit of the million we've earmarked to fight the pandemic and COVID-related costs as they pop up. We talked about what were the potential uses we may do with the other 5.5 million, and we said we would be back a few times to update you if any surprises had come up. To date, there haven't been any. We talked about what we thought might be good uses of those, since their allowable costs are for water and sewer and broadband infrastructure. Water and sewer, we have approved almost $20 million worth of projects at the fall town meeting. We said we have plenty of time to decide whether that's what we're going to use it for, but that's where we were. And since then, we've just been keeping an eye on, underserviced or pandemic-affected programs in the town. We have talked a little bit at our strategic planning meeting about mental health initiatives throughout the town and the spike in mental health issues. So what the purpose of today was to just kind of give you an update of where we are. We'll talk about it again going into the spring, but that's just sort of, not much has changed. We're keeping an eye on some stuff. We haven't had a whole lot of costs to date. We're currently, with the COVID spike around, we're not immune to that. We have had to use some, we will have to use some for covering shifts for public safety as people are out on COVID leave. But that hasn't been a huge number to date, so that's a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Denizio. Mr. Sagarino, I just want to clarify. This is just basically an update. We're not approving anything, correct?
Yeah, if you could just vote to confirm John's presentation in terms of what we've agreed to spend the money on to date. That would be appreciated.
We have, like you said, time's on our side, so we never know what's going to crop up. The PFAS came out of nowhere. You just never know, so I think that's a good strategy. Mr. Hogan.
And we are the ones who make the decisions on the spending of this money, correct?
Yes. Yes, so this is a grant. It's technically a grant, and that would be the board that would be in charge of that.
Mr. Priest.
No comments, thank you.
Mr. Randy.
Lovely.
Mr. Runyon.
Just briefly, I know that people at home may read articles, or they may see how other communities are spending these ARPA funds. And John, maybe you just take a moment to explain how maybe unfortunate Burlington was in the formula process, how the monies are divvied up. Because, you know, if you read it, you know, someone's building a school, the other people are doing this, that, and the other thing, and we're taking these little baby steps and being quite conservative with our spending, but we don't have what, you know, some of these other communities are receiving and based on a formula. Maybe just briefly touch on that.
Yes, thank you. So we don't want to make it sound like 8.5 million. We aren't very happy for that because we certainly are. And the formula was the same for a lot of the state and a lot of the country. So there was an allocation for our municipality that was $105 per, times your population, which was the same as everybody else. There's an allocation for our county, which was $194 per, times your population, which was, about just under $300 per person that we were going to get for our allocation. However, there are other towns that are considered major metropolitan areas, or cities and towns that are part of the Community Development Block Grant Program that increases their allocation quite significantly. So there are towns that have 5 times as much money as we do with a similar budget and a similar population.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make that, let folks be aware of that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that, John. Anything further? All right, I'll be looking for a motion to approve Mr. Denizio's plan as presented.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? 500. Item 370, discussion of and possible approval of increasing the demo permit fees. Michael?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the board had the discussion while I was out of town. Had the discussion of all the building permit fees, making adjustments, and I appreciate you holding this one until I got back to talk about it a little bit. Okay. We've all been in town here a long time, lived and worked here for many of us 50 years or more. And Burlington's always had a very well-diversified community here. And we provided housing for all income levels in town here. But that's been rapidly changing, at a rather alarming rate of almost one house per week is falling victim to the demolition process and being replaced by homes that, more middle class, lower class income level folks are unattainable, unreachable for a lot of folks. So I was proposing that we increase the demolition permit fee in order to generate some revenue in an attempt to help try and preserve some of those housing opportunities that we've always had here in Burlington, which are rapidly going away. Exactly how we plan on doing that, I couldn't quite tell you right now. I don't have all the answers. I've been talking for 3 years now about an aging in place program, for example, where we help some of our seniors try and stay in their homes longer, through modest home repairs or the addition of ramps or grab bars or things to make their life a little bit easier so that they can stay in their homes a little bit longer and not have to go to a nursing home or an assisted living facility, which will devour any assets, equity that they've built up in the community for 40, 50 years that they've been here. So it's for that reason, I think the town, this board should at least make some effort in addressing the inequities that we are going to be faced with here in Burlington by limiting the opportunities for people of all income levels. It's only a small step, but I think we have to start somewhere.
What numbers are you looking at?
I'm looking at raising it to $1,000. Now, I don't think $1,000 is going to make or break anybody in that industry.
Mr. Morandi?
I just think the $1,000 is going to be what it's going to be, but that $1,000 is going to go to the new homeowner. It's going to be put on his bill. Well, the builder itself is just going to add it, just like we do electrical fees and everything else. Is they just divert over to the next guy. That's all it is.
Yeah, cost of,
Yeah. Yeah, the
No-
guy's
no
gonna come in,
question.
knock the house down, and it's gonna cost him $1,000, and he's gonna put it onto the new one, so.
the average cost of a new construction, the average sale price for new construction starts at $1.4 million. I don't think that's going to make or break a buyer in that price range.
Mr. Hogan?
No, I agree with Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So would this also affect current homeowners who are looking to do work, like if I want to take down a portion of my house and do an addition, would I be charged $1,000 per, or $1,000 flat rate for any demo work done on my property? Or is this only for builders?
I couldn't tell you. I'm assuming it, I'm looking at the total demolition of a home.
Right.
So yeah, if you were going to rebuild your house on Crowdy Road and you were going to rip it down, yeah, it would apply to you as well.
Right, but I mean, like, if I had like a...
You're just saying an addition?
Yeah, so like, say I had...
Off the roof and go up a little bit,
Right, like,
go
I
up to
mean,
the left?
Look at a lot of ranchers that like toss on a small porch to the side.
Yeah.
They want to take that down to do more work to the house. I assume they're paying that demo fee.
I couldn't answer your question. I don't have that answer.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm putting you on the spot and I apologize. I agree that I don't think the $1,000 is going to sway the builders. However, I do like the idea of us creating a little bit more revenue from the builders who are tearing down the houses. If it's going to affect the residents too, who are looking to do work to their homes, you know, that puts me on the fence a little bit. I don't know, I'm torn right now.
All right. So that we don't get confusion, I don't know if this is a good substitute, Mike, but to Nick's point, I hadn't even given that a thought, a partial demolition. The building department requested 200 flat for demolition, and that's all it says.
Mm-hmm.
Would it be, or is it even possible to break them into two groups, partial demolition and full demolition, or complete demolition? Mr. Sagarino, do you know if that's?
Mr. Chairman, what I would suggest is if you wanted, we could put this on the agenda item for the next meeting, and we'll get clarification from the building department as to who actually pays the demolition permit. Is it just complete house takedown, or whether if somebody were to do an addition to their house, if that qualifies as well.
Right, and
we can get clarification for the board, and then you'll have the information to make the decision.
Okay, and just also, because according to this, the last fee increase is June 2013. This looks like it's strictly just residential. Do we have any information on the commercial side of it too? Maybe we can have him come here? Mike, you okay with that?
My proposal was for the residential demolition. I don't know if there's a distinction between commercial demolition and residential.
I wouldn't mind waiting to get those answers
wait.
clarified.
Sure, I can wait.
All right, so we'll hold this to one of our February meetings. Yep. Talk to Mr. Dupel and maybe see if he's available. Okay, that does not have to be voted on. Okay, minutes. Everybody take a look at the minutes. Anybody want to make a motion to approve them as?
I will make a motion to approve alcohol subcommittees, 11/30, 20, 10, 25, 21.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, executive session meeting.
Make a motion to approve 6/24/19, 10/26/20.
Second,
Second?
moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Make a
Opposed,
motion to
abstained?
strategy planning, 11/16/21. Second?
Okay, moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So it's 5-0-0, and
Regular meeting, 10/25.
2021.
2021.
Betty wouldn't have done
Oh.
What I tell you, I knew that was gonna be picked up on. I commented myself.
Hey.
So,
Just remember-
2021.
Lynn.
Exactly, he's already on the not good list.
All right, so the motion's been made, and Michael, did you second it?
Oh, I did, yes, I did.
To
yes.
approve the regular meeting minutes from 10/25/2021. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained. Okay, subcommittee reports. Michael, I'll start with you.
No, sir, no,
Joe, anything?
I do have something, it's not a subcommittee report, but while I'm speaking, I'm gonna talk about, oh my God, what did I do with it? Here we go, sorry about that, people. I'd like to take a moment to talk about Tony DeSimone, resident of Burlington that passed away last week. Tony, had been involved with our Ice Palace for years. He was, operated it, he ran it, he was a youth hockey program. He was just a wonderful gentleman, and I just want to give the family my condolences and say that he was I don't know who knew him and who didn't know him on the board here, but he was a really great guy and a great asset to the town of Burlington. If it wasn't for Tony, I don't think we'd have that ice rink down there, him and a few other guys that were involved in it. So I want to give my family the deepest regards to Tony DeSimone.
Thank you, Joe. Bob? Nothing? Nick, anything?
Just one quick thing, economic development, for folks who, maybe haven't seen it, but Melissa's been doing a great job plastering it all over the internet. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Online, you can get the login link through our website, burlington.org, go to the calendar, toggle over to tomorrow. We are holding a community forum on Mall Road, Middlesex Turnpike initiatives. Had a lot of great work, a lot of great initial discussions. Looking forward to seeing the community participate. So if you have a hot minute tomorrow night at 7 p.m., please join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. I have nothing. Mr. Sagarino, Town Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of items here. I would also like to acknowledge the recent passing of longtime town meeting member Gene Rossi. I think I would probably say this, that Mr. Rossi, I think, holds a record of voting no at town meeting. But, you know, certainly I will say that once you got a chance to know Gene, he was a heck of a nice guy and had a wonderful personality underneath that sort of cranky exterior. So I just wanted to acknowledge him tonight. Second of all, we got some great news from the State House. And please, if you have an opportunity to see Representative Gordon or Senator Friedman, please pass along our gratitude to them. I already have as well. But in the state ARPA bill, the town received a couple of earmarks, $100,000 to improve the air quality delivery system over at the Central Fire Station. This is a project that the town was contemplating doing with taxpayer funds. And the second allotment was $100,000 for further activities and placemaking activities at the Pocket Park in the town center. So we received $200,000 from the state bill. And kudos to our delegation. They worked very hard on behalf of the residents. So I just want to publicly thank them here. Last but not least, we've had some discussion about ambulance at several of our recent board meetings. John Denizio has informed me the ambulance information session is scheduled for the senior center Thursday, January 27th at 2 p.m. And obviously, given the situation with COVID, we're going to have to evaluate gathering sizes as well going forward. But they have scheduled a date, and please stay tuned as to whether there are any changes to that plan moving forward. That session, there'll be representatives of Burlington Fire Department and Armstrong Ambulance there to answer any questions that residents may have about ambulance billing in general, why they get a bill, why they don't get a bill, how Medicare fits into it, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Just one thing on the demolition permit. The application is used for complete demolition of the building or accessory building. Partial or interior demolition is, you go through your building permit and apply that way
Okay.
for clarification, okay?
All right.
Thank you, Lynn.
Any old business, new business? Citizens' time. Anybody on WebEx for citizens' time?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn is seconded by Mr. Hogan. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained? Meeting adjourned.